Hey, Sens fans, welcome to the Senstennial Podcast. We're here to kind of recap game one between the Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs and also set the stage for game two that'll be back at Scotiabank Arena and hoping for a better outcome for the Ottawa Senators this time. But right off the top, we're going to talk about game one, which Ottawa unfortunately was blown out 6-2. And I'm going to throw it over to Bennett first to get Bennett's thoughts on this one.
Um, yeah, most of my thoughts aren't fit to be aired near children or elderly relatives. It was a game, all right. It was a game that happened. The Sens at some points participated in it. At other points, they just watched themselves get styled on by the Leafs, especially on the power play, which was extremely effective against a penalty kill and a goalie that just looked totally outmatched. So that wasn't great. Obviously, it is one game. It takes four to win, and the score is not cumulative. It doesn't matter how much you lose by. Every game starts 0-0, and we've seen it time and time again. Teams treating blowouts in series like this, especially highly emotional series. So anything can happen. Uh, it's the first four, but certainly not a good start for the Sens, and I think that they have a lot of things to work on.
And Matt, how did you feel about this one?
I don't think I feel nearly as strongly as Bennett, and
Few people do.
this is fair. I would say the the biggest point of clarity that I have is that I don't think the score is indicative of what the game looked like. The Sens outshot the Leafs. They were out goaltended. But the first shot was a walk down the slot, gets to wire it, top cheese. Second goal is a breakaway. The third is on the power play, which I didn't love the goal on Ullmark for that one. Um, Fourth goal was on the power play. Fifth goal was on the power play. All this. And it felt like every time Ottawa responded, um, they, you know, they got scored on again. I think the Shabbat Jensen pairing had a really rough game. Analytically, they had a really rough game too. So, you know, the eye test and the analytics kind of married themselves last night on them. But I didn't think the Sens played as badly as some people may suggest. And I might have taken a dose of copium, and sure, I'll agree to that. But at the same time, Stellars played really well. He played really well. And when Ridley Gregg went down and brought him into the net, I was like, oh, there's hope. you know, but I think he made some key saves on on Zetterlund. He made some key saves on Batherson a couple times as well. I thought the big boys showed up in some ways. Like I think Stützle ended the game with 9 hits. But I'd much rather him have, a goal and 2 assists. And then the power plays that the Leafs could just continue and continue to get. I will definitely say that some of them were definitely penalties, but it didn't feel like a playoff refereeing game. And I saw the same thing from a lot of Leafs fans as well, saying they were a bit surprised at how many power plays they got, and Ottawa got two. But their power play looked terrible. So it, you know, the better team won last night, but I feel like the Sens have a lot more to give, and they can build on that game.
Yeah, and I think, you go back to Tim Stützle and the physicality. I think out of the gate, actually, Toronto was much more physical than Ottawa. And leading up to the playoffs, that was a big criticism of the Toronto Maple Leafs is they weren't a very physical team. People called them soft. Ottawa obviously was known to be more gritty. They don't have, a superstar talent. Stützle's the closest thing they have, and he has not had a 90-point season since 2 years ago, and things have been, I wouldn't say underwhelming, but obviously this season I think he was good. There were a couple stretches where maybe he didn't show up as much, but overall great player. But he's not at the level that Marner or Matthews is when it comes to point scoring. Not this year anyway, or William Nylander. And I think we saw that, right? Like those guys, they came out guns a blazing. Marner and Matthews linked up on the second goal for Toronto. Um, you had John Tavares, who was assisted, his goal was assisted on by Nylander Marner. Later in the game, Morgan Riley, he pitched in. So Toronto's top players were scoring. And I think, you want to see more from that Tkachuk, Giroux, Stützle line. Ottawa really only got one goal from their top six in Drake Batherson. And, it was nice to see the Greg Amadio Pinto line get on the board because they were seen more as like that shutdown line. So to score a goal for that line, good, get things going early, but you got to see more from the top six. And yeah, I think once the physicality started to set in on the Sens and, the nerves maybe wore away a little bit, the physicality for the Ottawa Senators picked up and you could see them, reciprocating or leading the hitting category, which I think is going to happen a lot in the series. Obviously, it's going to be a feisty one, so it'll be very interesting to see how things go. Matt, you were kind of reading my mind a little bit. I was going to get into the reffing, so maybe I'll go to Bennett first. And how did you feel about the reffing in Game 1?
Yeah, it definitely felt to me like the refs tipped the scales a little bit in the Leafs' favor. You could chalk a bit of that up to home crowd advantage. That is one of the ways in which it does have a genuine impact on the game. You can say that one sheet device is the same as another is the same as another, but the crowd always has a little bit of an impact on the way that the calls go. And maybe you saw some of that last night. Maybe you just saw some, I don't know what you want to call it, like trying to set a standard at the beginning of what's expected to be like a feisty series and trying to call more than what you normally might in a playoff situation. Uh, and so I can see it from both ways, like where's some of the calls soft? Like, yeah, I mean, like the Stützle call for that hit. I mean, even noted annoying guy PK Subban said, "Hey, come on, that's not a penalty," when he was doing the TNT hit. So, some of them were soft, but you know what? Like, you can't let the other team's power play score on the first shot every time they get a power play. Big if true, but yeah, letting the other team score on you immediately, like literally like 7 seconds into a power play, and then doing that 3 times. Hard to win a game that way. So, I mean, yeah, the Sens got a bit of bad luck in this one, but they certainly didn't do themselves any favors.
Yeah, and like you said, there were some penalties that were certainly warranted. Ridley Gregg, like I know the cross check was because he saw Tavares coming at him and wanted to just protect himself from a hit. Ends up getting the stick high, hits Tavares in, the neck head region. He goes down. Initially, they were going to call that a 5-minute major, gets reduced to a 2-minute minor. Honestly, I'm glad it got reduced. Didn't really help the outcome of the game, but aside from that, like you said, Tim Stützle, that boarding penalty in the second period was pretty weak. I think the call on Drake Batherson for tripping was pretty weak. It seemed like both guys kind of like pushed into each other and they both kind of lost balance. And then Batherson was the only one who got a penalty. And the penalty, I can't remember now who got it. Might have been Batherson in the third. I could be misremembering. But on Austin Matthews, like that one was also a little weak in my opinion. Matthews, like it wasn't a lot of physicality and he went down like a sack of potatoes and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
sure. So
Yeah.
there were a few penalties that I was like, okay, I don't feel like these are playoff penalties. They feel like things in the regular season that would just go uncalled, or sorry, maybe go called in the regular season, but ultimately it's kind of like a toss up. But in the playoffs, you would expect them to just not be called. I'll admit, like I've said many times, I think having a partner who is a Habs fan, watching the first period of them and the Capitals. Like there were a couple plays that definitely could have resulted in penalties for Washington and didn't. And it feels like, Washington gets away with a couple, but Ottawa sadly wasn't able to kind of avoid getting penalized. And I'm okay when the call is fair, but when it kind of seems weak, I don't know. It's a bit frustrating. Alas, I will pass it on to you, Matt. You kind of started off near the top talking about referees, so I'll let you kind of continue and maybe dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I definitely am a biased Sens fan for sure, but you also have to just look at the number of uh penalties given out. I don't think 6-2 is at all a reasonable game management at all. Like referees really try not to do that. Yet this is what happens. I think the Batherson trip was really soft. I felt the hit on Matthews was also really soft. I can understand the hitting from behind Stützle penalty, but I don't know. I just feel like those aren't called in playoff scenarios. But maybe as a not so often playoff watcher now, because this is the first time in a long time, things have changed. But I don't know. It didn't really seem that way. I'm glad the 5 minute major got brought down to a 2 minute penalty. It was definitely a penalty. No ifs, ands, or buts. But I look at it as a learning experience. I think the team needs to realize that they can't be taking any penalties or just rest on the laurels that it's playoff hockey, anything everything's fair game. It's not, or at least it's not in this series. So you have to assume that you're going to get called for things, and you might not like the call. So just tighten up. And as Bennett said, it's generally that, like, you don't want things, you don't want a puck in your net 7 seconds into a power play. And I don't think our defensemen had particularly great games. I didn't think Jake Sanderson took over like I was kind of hoping he would. And as I said before, I think Shabbat and Jensen kind of had a regression game, but I still think there's a lot of good things that did happen that they can build on. And they can, go to the video room and say, okay, we need to look at why we were letting Oliver Ekman-Larsson like walk down in the slot and just wire it from 15 feet out. Where was the back check, or what happened defensively to get there? So yeah.
There's one more topic I want to discuss about this game, and I think it's the one that happened in net. Obviously, Linus Ullmark has a track record of not having the best stats in the playoffs, and as Sens fans, we're obviously hoping that changes this series. Game one, unfortunately, did not buck the trend. Linus Ullmark continues to have a bit of a nightmare with playoff games, it seems. But I won't get too worried yet. But at the same time, I want to talk about it because at the other end, you had Stolars making his first ever playoff start and obviously won a cup as a backup with the Florida Panthers last season. But yeah, starting in his first playoff game, and he looked pretty steady. So let's kind of, talk about the goaltending matchup, and I'll kick things off with Bennett and what you've thought. I mean, obviously, it's only been one game, but maybe what your expectations were coming into this one.
Yeah, my expectations were certainly that things would be a lot closer. They didn't look especially close last night. Stolarz comfortably outdueled Linus Ullmark. It was a small penis Linus night last night, and you know, uh, maybe chalked up to nerves or whatever. I mean, Ullmark doesn't have a fantastic record in the playoffs, so it is concerning if you look at it as possibly part of a longer term trend. in isolation, based on the season that he's had, one game isn't, necessarily cause for concern. But if you look at all of his postseason results together, it's certainly a pretty mixed bag. That being said, he was put in a lot of bad situations, a lot of high danger scoring opportunities that the team was giving up, be it on the power play or, just letting people walk down Main Street, like we said. So I hope and expect that he'll bounce back in game two and, kind of like settle down into the crease a little bit. Because if he doesn't, this one's already over.
I think Bennett's, on to something there. I like just watching back some of the goals. A lot of them were unfortunately defensive breakdowns that you'd hope get saved. Listen, I think a lot of the goals were very good goals. I know a lot of people didn't like the fifth goal, the one that kind of fluttered in from the point, but he has one detrimental moment a game. Matthew Highmore tips it with his glove or blocks it with his glove, and puts it top cheese. Those it's hard to predict, and it goes in the net. I didn't like some of his rebound control, Ullmark. Some of it didn't end up in the back of the net, which is great, but you want to see a better control of those pucks, or at least deflecting them not into high danger zones. He got beat on his glove a couple times, and maybe he can shore that up, but like, how do you really do that? You just kind of hope he said it himself. You got to have a mind of a goldfish and just move on, because these games happen. Like, Dallas lost to Colorado 5-1 the night before. Am I saying Ottawa's Dallas? No, but I'm saying teams get blown out all the time. And Jake Ottinger is no slouch in net either. So I think this team as a whole needs to bounce back, because the amount of times that a Leafs forward was able to walk down the line and do whatever they wanted was too much. They scored multiple goals like that. So you need to be playing harder and more physical on these guys, so they don't have those opportunities to get those shots off. But ultimately, yeah, Ullmark had a bad game. I think he's going to bounce back the next game.
And my last comment on that will be that Ottawa did outshoot Toronto 33-24, but it felt like Ottawa had more low danger from the outside chances. And I think if they want to get to Stolars, they're going to have to get somebody in front, and they're going to have to find those shooting lanes from, in the slot and whatnot, because they only had, it felt like they only had a few. I know, I believe it was maybe Mike Kelly on Twitter afterwards posted some like 5-on-5 stats that Ottawa did outchance Toronto in like medium and high danger chances as well at 5-on-5, but it just didn't feel like it. It felt like Ottawa was mostly contained by Toronto. So I think getting more shots on net, as the boys say, pucks in deep, pucks on net, is going to be what the Sens have to go with going forward. But we also want to get things primed for game 2 in Toronto, which, when we release this video, will be this evening. So getting the stage set, I think one of the main things, as minimal as it might seem from a broad scope, but a lot of people were confused by a guy that, Matt, you just brought up in Highmore being dressed over a guy like Nick Cousins, who actually eliminated the Toronto Maple Leafs from the playoffs last year. And so I wanted to bring up that decision, and maybe do we see Nick Cousins getting a chance here for Ottawa in game 2?
So I thought it was injury. Did they not take him out because he was hurt? And I don't know if that was confirmed. That could just be headcanon.
It sounded like it was a very last minute decision.
Yeah.
because he skated like he was in like the lineup doing practice that morning, yesterday
Yes.
morning, and then it sounds like it was a decision that was made pretty late, which could mean anything. It could still have been a healthy scratch situation, but yeah, I mean, sorry to kind of jump in and snake your point, Dave, but
How dare you?
I would certainly prefer to see Cousins there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if it was for injury reasons, I maybe totally missed that. But hopefully he's ready to go. Either if not for game two tonight, then hopefully game three he's in the lineup because he might not be one of your high scoring forwards, but he's a guy he's been there before. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's a rat. Like if he's not on your team, you don't like the guy. And I think that Ottawa's going to need more of that this series. I know Matthew Nyes told the media that they were going to target Ridley Gregg more because he was annoying them. So that's great. I love hearing that. Get in their heads because throwing them off their mental game. We know that that's what Toronto struggled with in past seasons is that mental game and getting over the hurdle of the first round for the most part. So I think getting in their heads and having a guy like Nick Cousins to help you do that will be huge going forward in the series. But I'll swing it back to Matt to kind of round out his point there.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you said it best. Nick Cousins eliminated the Leafs. He has been playing great hockey since coming back. And I think he brings a lot more value to the lineup than Highmore frankly ever could. I think Highmore is the epitome of tweener AHL NHL guy. He's a guy that would be probably a regular roster guy on Chicago, but probably shouldn't be on an Ottawa Senators team. And I think that's a bit of the difference with this team versus some of the real cup contenders is that some of our fourth line, probably couldn't cut it on those cup contenders. And Matthew Highmore is a perfect example of a guy that shouldn't be there. Whereas Nick Cousins was literally on a cup winner. And he's an effective player and improved his play throughout the season, whereas at the start of the season, he was terrible. So I have to assume he may have tweaked something or something happened because there's not a world you have 10 out of 10 people watch both of those guys play a game. I don't think anybody's coming away and saying, oh, yeah, Highmore had a better game.
Bennett, how do you feel about that fourth line conundrum?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say here. I mean, like if the Sens are going to win this series, it's not going to be about what happens on the fourth line at the end of the day. I mean, we alluded to it off the top, Stutzler with like the 8 hits and everything, and how that isn't what you want him to be doing. I think all of Stutzler to Chuck, uh, and basically all of our forwards, minus, Batherson and Greg, just did not look ready for this series. They looked confused out there. They looked unsure of themselves. Someone like Stutzler trying to do too much, instead of focusing on what he's good at. Someone like Tkachuk looking oddly tentative for everything that's been said about the kind of player that he could be in a series like this. At the end of the day, Highmore over Cousins is like, yeah, like it's Cousins the better player for sure. I'd absolutely prefer for him to be playing, but like that's sort of like second or third on the list of things that need to go right for the Senators to come back here. Number one is getting semi-decent goaltending, and number two is our forwards and top defenders remembering just like how to play and how to not get overwhelmed and how to just like settle into the series. The hope is that we got most of the jitters out in game one, and I'm absolutely like fine to allow that, considering most of these guys have never played a playoff game before. But like I said before, it's like if they don't sort it out by game two, then it'll be a short series, and then we're having to wait until next year to see if they can sort out those jitters.
Yeah, that's totally fair. The other thing I wanted to talk about for game two is, I guess, going back to the crease. do we think that Linus Ullmark rebounds going into game two? That's also his first playoff game as an Ottawa Senator. Is that something where he's like, all right, like Matt said, he brought up having a memory of a goldfish. Is that something that, you wipe clean, he comes back and he has a solid game? Like, how are we feeling about Linus Ullmark going into game two?
Good. I think, I mean, I'll be Travis Green in this situation. We have a good goalie. He plays good hockey, and he is a good goalie. So to me, I think he's gonna bounce back, and just it's gonna be key to get a couple good shots in, get him the saves he needs, and he'll feel comfortable. The Leafs had like 5 shots in the first period, and getting into those types of grooves, it's just challenging. There's no bones about it, but you just hope of those 5 shots, one isn't a breakaway and the other isn't somebody getting to walk down Main Street and shoot it as hard as they possibly can from a very short distance away.
Bennett, feelings fairly similar, or how do you think it on this one?
Only up to go from here, right? Allmark had a good regular season, but there were weeks where he didn't. And, a playoff series happens within the span of approximately 14 days. There were 14-day spans throughout this season where Ullmark did not look good. There were, entire months where he looked great, but, blips count for more in the playoffs because they happen so quickly. And if this is an Ullmark blip that we're hitting, then, throw in Maryland. But if it was just like a one-off game kind of thing, which he's prone to this season, he'd often have like a shaky game where he gave up a bunch of goals. He had a shaky game against Carolina when in the last game of the season. That was a game that the Sens had absolutely had in the bag. And then, we gave up 5 unanswered goals before we got back into it. We made heavy weather of it, and Allmark didn't help with that. So we know that it's a potential liability, but you hope that he can shake it off. So I'd back him for game two for sure. And if it's another performance like that, then you have to look at your options.
Yeah, kind of like back in 2015, when they started Andrew Hammond for the first couple games against the Habs, and he was not feeling it, but they respected him helping them run to the playoffs. And then Anderson came in, and that series completely changed. So we'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. There was one other thing I want to bring up, and that was the second line with Perron, Cousins, and Batherson. They had a decent night overall, but unfortunately, Cousins got a game misconduct. He only ended up playing like 12 and a half minutes. That line in general, like Perron, Batherson, played just over 15 minutes each. I'd like to actually see them get a little bit more ice time as well. And maybe depending on, how Giroux or Perron are doing, because, both are older guys, and obviously they, I'm not going to trash them, but they might need a little bit more time to recoup. I would like to see Zetterlund maybe get some rotations in somewhere in that top 6, because I felt like he was feeling it, honestly, in game one. Like he kind of was buzzing a little bit, but I'd like to see him get a little bit more action. I'd like to see him on the power play again too, on the second unit. If Ottawa is awarded any power plays, they might have to give up a first round pick to get one, but we will get one, I believe. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe your guys' general thoughts on some of the players that you'd like to see more of. Maybe I know we talked about seeing less of a player or two, but yeah, I'll swing it over to Bennett first, and maybe any kind of personnel decisions or playtime that you would like to see more of in game two.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it already, but just, you need to see more from all of our big guys. I mean, like Batherson and Greg were sort of the only players that seemed particularly at it yesterday. Um, so you're going to need all of our guys to step up in a big way. I agree. I think I'd like to see Zetterlund uh, moved up the lineup. He looked sharp. I think Giroux looks his age at this point, and having him on the line with Stützle and Tkachuk is no longer the force that it used to be. I think Zetterlund's speed and shot would look better in that slot, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that before the end of the series. Uh, you know, put Giroux down on the second or third line, and get him some time on PP2. And I think that that's totally where he should be right now. Yeah, I mean, most everyone needs to improve, right? No one really covered themselves in glory. So, like I said before, only way from here is up.
Nave, how are you feeling?
I kind of look at it as the same way. I also thought Zetterlund had quite a good game yesterday, considering his deployment. It felt like Green was kind of shifting the lines all over a bit, and I think he just needs to get an extended look with Stützle and Tkachuk. And I agree with your point. I think Giroux and Perron don't like they're kind of struggling a bit in those top four roles or in those top six roles. But it's hard because that third line is really rocking. So you kind of move one player to fit another player, but you might screw up the chemistry. But I think Zetterlund is the guy that's you're gonna be able to kind of plug and play him wherever because he's a good player and he has a great shot. So giving him the opportunity to play with the team's best players is probably a good idea.
And any final thoughts before we wrap this one up and get ready for game two?
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to be here, right? And that's what I keep telling myself. I keep trying to be zen. It's really hard because it's Toronto. And I think if it was Washington, I legit would not care what happened in this series. Uh, but I just hate these motherfuckers so much. And I want to beat them more than I want the Sens to win. And if that makes sense to some of you, then you're my people. But even if the worst happens, and even if we do lose the series and it gets ugly, this is a free hit, right? This is, it's the first of hopefully many a playoff appearance for this group. It's okay if you don't look like world beaters in your first time out. That's sort of to be expected, and take this as a learning experience for what it is for this group. The real test, and I do believe this, is getting back here next year. I think that's a much more important goal for this team than trying to make something happen this year. I mean, hey, like you go into every game to win, you go into every series to win. If we come back into this series and advance, fantastic. Love it. More of that, please. But if we don't, then you refocus. It's like, okay, what did we do right this year that got us into this position? Because as long as you're in, you always have a shot. And so that's what I think the most important goal is right now. That being said, with my previous point, it's Toronto. Like you have to want to beat these guys so badly, and it's hard to not. It's hard, man. It's hard. Game one was
Yeah,
hard. I
Bennett's spot on. I
I
want
don't
to
know
beat
what else to
them
say, man.
so badly. They're terrible in every way, and it would be very nice to go into this series as the underdog and beat them.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Sens players said it like there's a lot more pressure on the Leafs than there is on the Sens. And I think they need to recognize that they have a very unique opportunity to do something here that a lot of people are already counting them out. So just go in and like make some noise,
Yeah.
you know? Make some fucking noise.
Hell yeah. All right. Well, on that, we'll cap off the game two primer and go Sens go. And let's get a split here coming back to Ottawa.
No sense go.
Go Sens, go, boys.